美味しいなタウンに舞い降りた一輪のバラ。
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, I'll tell him. Hey, Rosemary, you might want to lawyer up because Tsubomi says that she's gonna sue your ass. Our second episode of the series opened with a quick and digestible recap from our narrator and some not so digestible subtitles. Yeah, okay, last time I know some of my commenters had problems with these subtitles as they were distracting, but personally I didn't think they were all that bad, especially if they were just going to be a one-off thing. However, for this episode at least, they came back. And while introductionary subtitles for our new characters make perfect sense, I can't imagine many viewers not remembering the names of our main characters, or at least not picking up on them because of the narrator. Now, I'm not saying it's the worst thing ever or anything, but it is a little distracting, and I hope they don't continue doing it past these first few episodes. Anyway, we did at least get some decent world building about the fairies of the show as our characters discussed them organically. And we would learn even more about them from King Candy. Okay, sorry, I really should call this guy by his real name, which is the
King-sama?
Cook King. Yeah, I think I'll just stick with King Candy. Hell, hearing this dude's creepy little laugh, I'm almost sure he's gonna turn out to be the real villain of the show, but yeah, as it turned out, Yui's watch also acted as a portal back to the kingdom. I'm not gonna deal with these puns anymore. So of course, our protagonist's mission was to catch them all before the bundle gang did. Speaking of whom, we then nicely transitioned to the lair of our antagonists, who were reporting into their boss, Godatsu, which yeah, is another synonym for they were after the fairies in the hopes of rewriting the rest of people and somehow staking claim over all the cooking in the world. Yeah, they didn't explain how they would do it just yet, but still, all of that and the bad puns aside, this was pretty effective world building, especially when Rosemary explained the damages the bundles were causing. So yeah, I didn't really bring this up last week because I just figured I could bring it up here, plus that review was going a little long. But, you know, the threat of the bundle gang could be legit threatening if they actually do follow it up right. While the loss of flavor of specific foods may not do much actual damage in the short term, for places like Oshina Town, which seems to have built its entire economy off of its whining and dining, it's gonna hurt their wallets in the long term. I mean, they even have streets named after their specific cuisines, which, while a little on the nose, is not too far off from some real-life locations that try to play up their local fairs. Hell, I live in a state where firsthand I can say that our stock took a huge nosedive when we had to lock down on tourism. And in the case of really any restaurant, just one bad impression can lead to all kinds of bad word to mouth, especially with social media as it is today. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Nagomi Diner took a massive hit in the form of a ton of bad Yelp reviews just from one attack by the bundles. Threats can of course become meaningless like they did with Tropical Rouge if there is no solid follow-up, so hopefully the show can do it. But they still had other problems, like Rosemary's necklace having cracked in the last episode, as explained by his fellow captain, Fennel, because get it, it's an herb. Though on a side note, I will say this dude has a good voice, to the point his VA does a lot of Japanese dubs for Benedict Cumberbatch, which of course included Doctor Strange from the MCU. Hey, Mr. Sorcerer Supreme, you think you can summon Spider-Man and Leopardin? I'm pretty sure they could deal with all of this, no problem. But yeah, according to Steven, on top of being unable to get back to his kingdom, Rosemary would also be unable to access most of his combat skills. However, Yui assured him that she'd be able to cover for him because she was the main character and all that. They also gave him the purse of his master, who I'm guessing is the shadow guy in the opening, who also briefly lived in the human world and made a decent chunk of change. Hopefully, we'll get a follow-up to that plotline, as well as Takumi and Rosemary seemingly knowing each other. And to possibly further that plotline, the latter rented a room at the former's family guest house. From there, we got a really good, subtle scene that just through Rosemary's distraught expressions and no dialogue, we could tell he was a little gloomy and unnecessary narration is, unnecessary. The next day, which again was kind of unnecessarily told to us by the narrator, Yui managed to convince her mom, Akiko, sorry I had to point that out, that she wanted to take in a baby fox. And I guess this lady had never heard of rabies because she gave her okay without asking if it had gotten its shots yet. This also led into a flashback that would become more significant later in the episode. She then had a snack with Rosemary of tea and cucumbers, ew. I mean, okay, I like that the show is promoting healthy eating, but does it have to be cucumbers? I think I'd rather eat a bonafide meal instead. Still, I digress, as we then got probably the best scene of this episode, as after Yui again tried to assure Rosemary that she had everything covered,
Okay, now you have my attention.
Yeah, let's not forget, even though he doesn't always act like one, this guy is the captain of a military outfit, so he likely knows the dangers of war, and has probably even seen some of his comrades get KIA'd on the battlefield. Thus, the very idea of drafting a young girl into his fight shouldn't sit well with him, similar to how Rablin felt when she recruited Nodoka. Granted, it does just kind of feel like they're repeating Killing Good, especially considering that Saka Hirobayashi's only other Precure writing credit was for that show, but hey, let's give it a chance. Anyway, he took his leave, and just by the title of this episode, you can guess where this was going, but whatever. Great subtle storytelling here that doesn't need explanation. Elsewhere, that other girl, who I'm sure won't become important later, was enjoying some kage chicken. And yet, I don't see Hiroshimono anywhere. Yay! Yeah, I'm not even gonna bother with context. You can look that up for yourself. Of course, this brought out a fairy, as well as Gento, who captured it. This alerted Yui on her Digivice, watch, so she needed to head out with her partner, but both Komi and Rosemary had checked out the guest house, only leaving behind a letter which, just going by Yui's expressions, we could surmise everything that...
それはマリちゃんからのお別れの手紙でした。
Well, duh.
Yeah, I'll bring this more up during the closing thoughts, but geez, does this show really need to relearn some of the basics? Anyway, Rosemary confronted Gento, who used a pepper mill as her catalyst this week. Of course, it attacked using its spice coming out of its,
That's disturbing.
Like, seriously, you could have put that somewhere else, like, say, on his bottom, or okay, never mind, forget I say anything. But yeah, for whatever reason, he thought he could handle the Baozo on his own and not endanger Yui, who in spite of the warnings in his letter, was still on her way to help him. Surprisingly, she also passed by the Pretty Holic, which I guess are just a chain of stores in the Precure-verse, and some other girl who I'm sure won't become important like over the next 2 episodes or anything. Anyway, her watch led her to the force field, where she ate her partner and transformed. Yeah, I'm not getting over that. And you know, this monster's design aside, it still did put up a good fight, and I'm sure this show won't lower itself to any more suggestive stuff like... So, after getting hit by its paper, Rosemary of course tried to push Yui into quitting the superheroine thing, but she remembered something her grandmother had said.
一番強いのは誰かのために頑張る心なんだ。
人は人を愛すると弱くなる。弱さを知ってる人間だけが本当に強くなれるんだ。
Hey, if y'all are going to do it once per episode, so am I. But yeah, while I think Tendo's granny put it better, this wasn't a bad quote to live by, and a decent philosophy for the main heroine of this show. Inspired by her words, Rosemary supported Yui in a very well-animated sequence which involved a clever distraction to leave the pepper cruncher wide open. With that, they rescued the little KFC spirit, and the episode ended with Rosemary giving Yui a new toy ad, whilst also advertising their main seller of the season. No, and another fairy decided to wake up after 2 episodes worth of action. God, I wish I could sleep that well. Oh yeah, another thing I didn't talk about due to time constraints was the ending theme to the show, which, yeah, I'll say I like it a lot more than the opening. As, unlike with that, and again, I did not find it bad at all, it did kind of feel like they were just going through the anime OP motions, while this had some more unique touches. Most notably, this really good motion cap dancing. I think they just did a really good job rendering it, especially with how they managed to work those massive skirts, and yet still move dynamically and not just like some overly cutesy idol dance.
They even managed to match fairly well with the actual lyrics. Plus, and while this is entirely subjective, I do think I like Chihaya Yoshitake singing here a lot more than Machiko's. I don't know, maybe it's because I've heard the latter a little too much in this franchise, or just prefer Konosuba openings, but I think for at least this case, I prefer Yoshitake's beats.
This was another solid intro episode with a lot of much needed world building, as well as a little not so necessary building. I mean, getting to see a clear scale of the threat the bundle game posed really helped to sell the urgency of the conflict, especially through Rosemary's little outburst. Stuff like that is a great example of showing without telling, and yet the show still kinda falls into that trap. Hopefully they will scale back on the narrator and the subtitles, because right now at least they're not doing the show any favors.
One of the major things I was hoping they would do with this season, compared to the more laid-back Tropical Rouge, was give us at least a bit more of an actually threatening antagonistic force, which so far they do seem to at least be aiming for with this season. Not only did this episode give us some necessary overt exposition, but more importantly is what they didn't tell us through stuff like Rosemary hesitating to let Yui continue to fight, on top of his own insecurities of not being able to accomplish his mission, which was all mostly told to us with no words. However, yeah, when the narrator butted in and didn't just let the visual storytelling speak for itself, that's when they broke the basic rule of show, don't tell, which applies to every story, including kid shows, especially in this franchise, where they have practiced that very successfully until now. And while they fortunately only broke that rule in those 2 moments I pointed out, I really do hope that they don't do it for any more critical moments in the show. That plus the intro subtitles are admittedly mostly minor annoyances in an otherwise solid episode where we got more development for Rosemary and kind of Yui. Again, she at least now has a solid motivation for her actions, but I do at least hope that she gets as much development as her friend. Still, overall, narrative jank aside, good stuff that hopefully gets cleared up by the next few episodes.
Work on part 2 of this Dojishi review is all but done, so do look forward to seeing the very Yuri ending of this book later this week. From there, since nothing new has come out of this anti-tuber drama, we'll just buckle down and make that Tropical Rouge overview. If anything, I just really want to express my mixed feelings about that season. So look forward to all of that. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I've got Yelp reviews to write.